If you listen to finance videos on YouTube, you've likely seen this guy, Dave Ramsey. He's the largest finance persona in the world. With his massive following, Ramsey makes one thing very clear: pay off all your debts as early as possible, including your mortgage. On its surface, it's a simple time-tested philosophy that you would think makes complete sense. Having your mortgage paid off in America used to be a badge of honor. In today's video, we examine how the truth has changed and view the concept of debt through a different prism, one that will shatter your perception of the American dream. Ramsey is very passionate about his opinions regarding the mortgage. Step 6 in his infamous 7-step plan is marked as pay off your home early. Calls into a show involving this subject typically goes something like this.
Resistance from friends of mine that I've told this idea to, and they said paying off your mortgage early is stupid. You know, there's much better investments to be made. I'm pretty confident in what I've been learning from listening to you. I just want to get your thoughts on that game plan that we're trying to formulate for when we get out of debt.
If broke people are making fun of your financial plan, it means you're on track. Okay? If fat people are making fun of your diet, it means you're on track. And that's what you're talking about here. So who gives a crap what broke people think about paying off your mortgage? They're ridiculous.
So could it be possible that Dave is completely wrong? To find out, we begin with a basic example. Today, the average 30-year mortgage is 4.23%, and the median single-family home price is $408,000. Based on that information, we can assume that the average American has a mortgage of around $2,100 after taxes and insurance. Over the life of this 30-year loan, you would pay the bank a total of $252,000 in interest alone. That's the fee you pay for borrowing the money. Based on that information, you would think that Ramsey is right. Why give the bankers this money? Just pay it off early and you save hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, before you click off this video, there is indeed a rather convincing alternative argument. You see, right now, our government is acting like a drug addict. For decades now, the US Federal Reserve has printed trillions of dollars to finance programs that they have no money for. Unfortunately for us, their behavior has severe consequences that trickle down to normal people like you and me. If you weren't aware, inflation is at record high levels. By the government's measure, it's at 7.5%. Many argue that this is all due to excessive borrowing and printing. Now, what does this have to do with a mortgage? Well, here's the point. To fully grasp what I'm about to tell you, we need to understand that over the past 107 years, inflation has averaged 3.25%. In that same period between 1914 and 2022, it's been as high as 23% and as low as negative 15%. So where am I going with all of this? Well, it turns out that in a high inflation environment, debt from a pure math perspective is a good thing. You see, if wages increase with inflation, which they historically have, and if the borrower already owed money before the inflation occurred, the inflation benefits the borrower. This is because the borrower still owes the same amount of money, but now they have more money in their paycheck to pay off the debt. This results in less interest for the lender if the borrower uses the extra money to pay off their debt early. Here's how it breaks down with the same house and the same interest rate we used in our previous example, except this time let's include the effect of inflation, which 99% of mortgage calculators on the internet do not include. Okay, so $408,000 with a 4.25% interest rate. Now for the average inflation, let's use the 1970 to 2000 period as the baseline. In those 30 years, the average annual inflation reading was 5.38%. So what does that leave us? Well, adjusted for inflation, we would pay a total of $149,000 in interest. A lot better than the $252,000 we were quoted originally. But this is still a lot. Maybe Ramsey was right all along. But we are missing one thing. We are not including the appreciation of the home, which historically has followed the rate of inflation. Although it's not a direct correlation, over the past 50 years, it has been safe to assume that with rising prices, home prices have steadily gone up following inflation numbers. In 30 years, if we assume an average inflation rate of 5.38%, our $408,000 house will be worth just under $2 million. That may sound insane, but keep in mind that people who were buying in the 70s for an average of $25,000 probably would say the same thing when 50 years later their houses are now worth $400,000. Perception changes over time, especially when it's just 5% a year. The compounding effect is profound. Now, if that's the case, math tells us you are much better off holding on to that payoff sum and investing it into something with similar risk. Instead of paying off your mortgage, you can easily invest it into the S&P 500 for 30 years. By the end, assuming a conservative 6% return, you would have around $2.3 million on top of the gains you made with your house appreciating. So maybe Ramsey was wrong. Mathematically, it seems that paying off the mortgage isn't worth it. But there is a catch. Despite the math, I still believe Dave Ramsey is right. I know there are dozens of YouTubers who claim the opposite and use facts like the ones I mentioned to argue against so-called boomer philosophy. But they miss out on one thing. All of their assumptions center around the fact that the market will continue to return its 100-year average, inflation will continue to be elevated, and most importantly, you will have the psychological strength to hold through various life events and market collapses. It's easy to say don't pay off your mortgage and throw that money into the S&P 500, but what would happen to most people if overnight the market went into a deep recession like it did in 2008? Let me give you a quick thought experiment. Let's say you don't pay off your mortgage and instead begin investing that lump sum into the S&P. Like I mentioned earlier, towards the end of this 30-year period, you would have around $2.3 million. But what if 25 years in, you're holding $1 million and another 2008 scenario occurs? A 50% drawdown happens overnight and you watch as $500,000 is wiped away. Panic is taking over the market. Do you have the mental strength to hold? Most people cannot answer that question honestly, as they have never been put in that spot. On top of this, various life events could cause you to dip into that money, spending it on a reckless purchase fueled by a potential period of mental instability or pressures outside of your control. Like Ramsey says, no one has ever regretted paying off their mortgage early. It simply doesn't happen, and the psychological boost you get from being completely debt-free could very well allow you to have the freedom to take bigger risks, resulting in more wealth and success. So while yes, mathematically in most scenarios we can forecast that we'd be better off not paying it early, but the psychological element is incredibly important and often overlooked.
The house is going to appreciate exactly the same amount whether it has debt on it or not.
Sure.
So you putting the 150 on it doesn't cause more appreciation. The only savings you would have would be the interest rate on that amount of debt, whatever your mortgage interest rate is. And as compared to what you might make on a mutual fund, that might be small, to your point, to your concern. I would put it on the mortgage anyway. And the reason is that I am going to have a paid-off mortgage, whether it's selling this property and moving the equity to another property, but I'm going to have a paid-off home as a part of your financial plan as soon as I possibly can, because all of the data with all the millionaires that we work with, from the millionaire study that Hogan did, says that there's two primary things that cause people to have their first $1 million net worth, and first $1 to $5 million net worth, and that is their 401k retirement savings.
Yes.
And you're not going to put it in that because it's payroll deduct, and a paid-off home mortgage. We did not find a single millionaire out of 10,000 of them that we studied that said, I became wealthy because I never paid off my home and I used all of that money to invest.
Right.
All of them either had their homes paid off or were heading towards having their homes paid off. They never once said, I would never pay off my home because I always want to invest.
I believe Ramsey is right at the end of the day. If you disagree, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed.